So this is the wall before it all started. And let me give you an idea of how I decided to go the route I did. First off, I'm using full sheets, 3/4 inch birch. I take them and stain them with a little bit of walnut finish Danish oil. I just wanted a little bit of contrast so it wasn't completely plain, purely for visual aesthetics. There's really no good way to do it, since what I'm doing is ripping these boards down into 5 inches wide, then ripping that in half on a 45 to make the cleat. One side has stain, one side won't. I'll have to restain the other ones, but it's a little extra work. It might be a little bit of a waste of finish, but overall, again, it's just for visuals. So let me get started staining this big sheet, and I'll show you where we go from there. So as I said, I'm using Danish oil to put just a light coloring into the wood. Pops out a little bit of a grain, being that it's going to be the actual cleat anchors on the wall. That'll give it a little bit of a contrast, and since it's going to be almost 25 feet long, it'll be, in my opinion, visually appealing in the shop. So, pretty simple stuff. Flood it on, wipe it, let it sit for about 15 minutes, wipe it off. 2 coats if you want. You can clear coat after that if you want. Otherwise, that's about all the work it takes. So let's go. So the next step is going to be breaking down the full sheets into the French cleat strips. Just to make sure, quick overview of a French cleat. It's simply a piece of wood cut on a 45 with an adjoining same thickness piece of wood, bolted to a wall. This 45 side bolted to whatever rack, tool, object you want to hang. It slides in to hang on the wall. That's simple. What I wanted to make sure was the width of each strip was the same, so they could be used interchangeably. It didn't matter if I was using it for mounting to the wall or to bolt on the back of a tool rack. So what I did was, I decided I wanted a total usage of 5 inches wide. I cut this exactly 5 inches wide using a milling block to make sure it's the exact size. So this will be my template to set my fence to my blade. Once I start cutting, then I actually make my French cleats. This took a lot of trial and error, but I have them exactly the same size. So it can go either way, it doesn't matter. For reference, this measurement from here to the tip of the blade to the fence is 2 3/4 inches. You might have to adjust it slightly, but at 2 3/4 inches, cutting this 5 inch sheet down, of course accounting for the kerf, on a 1/8 inch kerf, yields French cleats that are the exact same. Again, I'll use this as my master to set my fence when I start ripping the next set of pieces of plywood into the strips. All total, it's going to take about 90 of these 4-foot wide strips to complete my French cleat wall. Here's about half of them. Had to stain the edges, a little bit more work, but in the end I think it's going to be worth it. In addition to wood glue and nails, I want to put 3 screws in each to help secure it a little bit better. So what I did was make a small template to catch the edge, come in, line up, tap it to make the 3 holes as a marker, and then I will come back with a countersink holes and put them in here, and eventually that will be the finished product. So it'll be secured with wood glue, brad nails, and 3 number 8 wood screws. So this is a style countersink bit that I'm using to set these holes. I'm going to use a Torx head style wood screw And I don't want it to sit proud of the surface, but I want a nice flush look. What I have found is, obviously, if you dig too deep into there, you're going to bury the screw. If you don't countersink at all, when it digs in there, it doesn't make the prettiest hole for the head to sink into. So what I'm doing is, as I countersink, is just barely kiss the surface of the plywood with the actual wider shoulder. Barely touch it. Then when you put the screw in, you can seat it to where it's perfectly flush. It makes a much cleaner finished look. So that step is complete. Right there are 90 strips, 4 feet wide, about 2.5 inches long, for all my French cleats for 24 feet of linear wall. Went ahead and stained all the edges, the bottom sides as well. So once again, this side of the shop, as we transform, is going to be all French cleat storage, save for the last 18 inches before that door. So back to actually getting to build the French cleat wall. It has been a bit, but this is going to be the area. It's roughly 32 feet long. It's actually 9 feet tall, so I'm using 4x8 sheets. There'll be a gap at the bottom where it's just filler plywood with no cleats on them, and I'm going to come down to about 30 inches from the floor with the actual cleats. But my goal is to have the French cleats run the entire length of this wall. Now, to recap, also, this wall was covered with OSB when we first bought this place and I got into the shop. I believe what they had built out in here is an apartment. I have since removed all the windows, insulated that back up because we don't need that. The other room inside is for a couple of other things we have going project-wise. So this is just going to be one solid wall. So I have got a bunch of 3/4 inch Baltic birch plywood sitting right here. All of that right there is going to be on my French cleat wall, and my cleats are in a pile on the other side of the room that I stained and cut up. And let's get to building a wall. So just as a side note about Baltic birch in general, or at least the stuff I get from my supplier, he's a local guy who builds pocket doors, and like a lot of plywood, they do have a little bit difference on the sides. This side's a paint grade. It's very smooth, nice clean finish to it, but you will see some imperfections that have been filled, ready to paint. And then there's a side that is cabinet grade, ready to stain. There's no imperfections into the actual wood itself, no filler, nothing like that. It's just ready to be used and stained. So just pay attention wherever you get it. There might be a little bit of difference from one side to the other. So to give you an idea how I'm attaching all this and what I'm doing here, I did go ahead and countersink all my holes, because what I wanted to do is have kind of a clean finished look to it. I'm going to use 3 wood screws with glue, of course, holding it. Just standard PVA, like tight bond. And then number 8, black screws. I chose black specifically for the color. I'm putting 12 of these cleats down per board, and then there's going to be 7 boards up. So let's get to gluing. So it's time to get these attached. And what I'm going to do is put 3 screws across the very top into the stud header, and then I'll probably put 3 or 4 down the body lined up on the studs. What I'm going to use are fast cap type fasteners. Again, not sponsored by anybody. I paid for these. I'm using their flush mount drill bit system. And what it comes with in here, sorry, doing this one-handed, is an assortment to be able to hide the caps of fasteners. So there's the bit itself, you can see. And what it does, it has an adjustable cutter head so you can adjust the depth in which it cuts. Then the head itself is actually pretty flat, the head of the fastener. So when it sits flush, it's actually just under the surface of the wood and nothing sticks up proud of the surface. So I bought cabinet style installation screws here, and they are a 2.5 inch black oxide type. So let me run one bit in and I'll show you how that works. Okay, hopefully the autofocus is working. So I'm lining up center on this one. Like I said, it's going to be at the very top, which will run into the header. And again, showing how the bit has a cutter head that you can adjust the depth on. That ring stops moving when it hits surface. There's the hole. Obviously I'm not mounting it yet, but just to show you what this will do. Now once it's sitting in there, it's perfectly flush. So if you put a French cleat in, it doesn't interfere with it. You can move wherever you want and it doesn't hit that. And you've got a nice, big, thick, flat head to help hold your fixture to the attachment point. Okay, next is to cut out a couple of boxes for, cut out a couple spots for junction boxes and get ready for some electric. Okay, so the holes are set. The constructor of this wall didn't do exact measurements, so I had to measure to make sure that I hit the studs exactly, because what I'm going to do is this board goes to the first section right here. There's electrical there, so it's going to pull through here. It'll pop through a junction box over to get it measured over. So I'll have power on the bottom. The way this wall is set up, there's power outlets. Can't see for the boards that are in place right now. But there's 4 power outlets along the bottom of the wall. I'm going to go ahead on the 2nd and 4th boards and pop in right about there. Cut in a J-box so I have power above the workbench surfaces as well. And Elvira says she wants to make a cameo appearance too. So, all right, we're about to mount them up onto the wall. Here we go. So I had my buddy Charlie come over to give me a hand with this. I added 12 strips for the French cleats on there. That probably put about another 30 pounds onto the board. So these things were probably upwards of around 90 pounds each. Definitely need a second set of hands. So what I devised for this was using my floor jack with a tray and another piece of birch to catch the bottom piece of French cleat to lift it up. There's a lip at the top we use as a leveling marker, and instead of starting from the bottom up, since these walls are going to be 9 feet tall, decided to go as high as possible. I'll probably put some cleats up top and hang some things that are not frequently reached, but something I would want to store. Makes it easy to do that. What I also did was using the flathead screws like I'd shown in the previous video or section of this video, and seated them along the studs, basically 3 along the top, and came down and put 4 across the bottom and hit them somewhere in the middle as well. Yeah, my battery kept dying on here, so there's a little bit of section, but not really missing anything here. Just showing them again being seated in place, marking them. The wall again is kind of bowed from the previous construction, original construction of it, so it's not going to sit perfectly flat. There will be a few sections that can't span completely the whole length, but this still gives me a whole lot of flexibility and options as far as ways to hang things and store things. Once we got all the final pieces put in place, everything secured, that's a functional part of the wall. The rest of this that you see is just going to be kind of trim out, finish out, kind of help hold the insulation in place, and of course just make it look better. So that last section right there is only 18 inches wide. These were 9 feet tall, so I just needed 12-inch section runs at the very bottom. And again, on this, I used the smaller headed screws just to seat them, just to hold these in place. Just trim cover up for aesthetics only. And as you notice there, from where I'm sitting, the outlets in the wall will sit below the workbench level. That top French cleat is just above the workbench. All I did here was tie in some outlets. They're all on one circuit, but I've got this tied on using 12 gauge wire, so the circuitry is a little bit heavier. Again, I'll say it one more time. I do my own electric work on the basic stuff like this. Everything was shut off. I triple test to make sure every circuit's dead before I touch anything. I don't recommend anybody to do their own electric unless you're comfortable with it yourself. Always hire an electrician if you can. One thing I will note here is I always tape around to make sure that the screw heads are covered, just in case when they get put back in there you don't wind up shorting anything out. The blocks, the box is at the top, and Wesley had to make an appearance to the shop to come say hello and check me out. So once it was all set and done, had to make sure everything was connected right, checked all my circuitry, make sure I didn't have something backwards. That's real easy to do. And looks like everything went solid, so I'm happy with the results. So all that's left is cover it all up and call it done. Okay folks, there it is. That is 24 feet of French cleat wall. Now, it's not perfect. There are definitely some spots where the wall had bowed, and again, I didn't build the wall, but the bottom outlets were already there, so I've got some outlet availability for under the workbenches. I went ahead and popped a couple up top so I can have some power outlet availability there as well. And one more long view this way of all that French cleat goodness. Okay, that's it. So I know this has been a really long video. I hopefully gave you a lot of detail in here. If there's anything I missed or you have questions about stuff, please put it down in the comments. Again, I will put another note in here, but I don't advocate doing your own electric unless you know what you're doing. I take no responsibility for any of that. I will put a link to a lot of the parts and tools that I used in here, especially like the cutter bit, so that you can find those. Again, I'm not sponsored by any of this. If you like what you saw here, please like, subscribe. I really appreciate it, and thank you folks. Have a good day.